Welcome to the Meincke Show podcast. The Meincke Show podcast. I know you didn't know I was going to do that.
I did, actually. I
You
forgot.
did?
I love the jingle. It's good.
I just got to get it produced now.
That's right.
We have with us in studio Carrie Fischer, who's running for the UCP nomination. And Carrie, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
We've met in parking lots and events and whatnot for a few years now.
Yeah.
And why the hell are you still doing this politics stuff? Like, it's a crazy game. Why politics for you?
It is, because it matters so much. It makes such a difference in people's lives. We saw before 2015, everybody just kind of coasted, didn't really think politics mattered. And then all of a sudden the NDP hit and people are really starting to realize how much politics do matter. I've had opportunities in the last several years to really have conversations with people and understand what they're going through and be able to get them resolution to those issues. And for me, that's why I'm in, is because it's being that interface between that big bureaucracy and government and the big nasty word and the people who actually need to access the services there.
You've been at it for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
You did the mayoral run, doing this run. Is there a side of it that makes you think, geez, maybe, that something that's less attractive about politics? Do you wrestle with being in this world at all?
I do sometimes, yeah. Especially when my kids start seeing some of the nastiness that's going on, or people get particularly nasty with any one of the politicians. I'm always thinking of their family and what their family's having to read and see. I know last fall when there was some things that got really nasty in the mayor's race, and it took a little bit after that as a family for us to have a conversation around, okay, but we know who we are, we know what's right, and we know that people are good. So let's just focus on that. There's always going to be nastiness in the world, but we can't focus on that because at the end of the day, what we focus on grows, and we just refuse to believe that that's predominant in the world.
I won't be voting for Justin Trudeau anytime soon, but nobody's a complete idiot.
Right.
He did say something that was interesting a couple of years back that I thought, I respect that. And he was talking about what he learned from his dad about not beating up on the competition and throwing names. I don't know if he's actually making good on that or not, but I think it's a good thing to live by. And with the stuff that's been happening in the States right now, I mean, it's so much more dramatic than Canadian politics.
Yeah, it is.
But it is disgusting.
It is.
It is disgusting. The idea that you can destroy somebody else's life with innuendo and rumors and nothing more than a baseless accusation, and then be friends 2 years later, and get along just fine.
Yeah.
Have you found anything like that anywhere near that level in politics so far for yourself? Like you said, the mayoral race was a little unpleasant at times, but
yeah, no, I mean, and we don't have anything to that level here in Canada, luckily, and I hope it stays away.
Yeah.
Every now and again we get close to bordering on going too far, I think, but I think for the most part Canadians are a little bit more reticent to get nasty. We tend to stick to policy a little bit more. We tend to look for substance. We tend to look for fact behind accusations, and it's just that 3-second delay, I guess, before all hell breaks loose at the end of the day. I even look at Trump, your earlier question. I don't agree with most of what Trump does, but at the end of the day, he's a man with children and a young child still at home. And the things that people say about him, rightly or wrongly.
They've even attacked his kid.
They have attacked his kid, and that's off limits. Yeah. I mean, as politicians, our families are around us. We need our family support. We bring them with us to events. But at the end of the day, I'm the one standing out front. And they are with me as support, but they're untouchable. They need to stay out of the diatribe.
You've been working hard this campaign. What's your why behind it? Like, what drives you to make all the phone calls, to knock on the doors, to it's a grind. It's like the hardest It's the most insecure job in the world if you do get in. After 4 years, you got to do it all over again. It's worse than another job interview. You've got to bust ass to get into office. There's no easy way in.
No.
And maybe you'll have to be looking for a new job in 4 years. So why take that on? Like, what's your biggest driver? It's for what you're saying earlier. It sounds like it's a sense of service for you.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I believe in the people of this area. We've got some big issues that we need to deal with. We need strong, solid representation from somebody who knows how to have the conversations up there with the nuance and understand when to push and understand when to pull back and play or compromise. And at the end of the day, it's because I believe in the people here. We've got really great people here that are just trying to survive and build a life for their family. And we've seen government policies come down that are restricting that ability for them. The carbon tax is killing seniors and farmers and ranchers and anybody on a fixed income right now in most of rural Alberta, because of the fact that we have to drive everywhere. We don't have transit. We're not pulling cattle on an electric vehicle. So at the end of the day, these policies that are destabilizing our economy and driving away investment are impacting us right down to the minimum wage earner in the coffee shop. And we have to have good people getting involved to make sure that we're steering that away from that and putting Alberta on a good track for a strong future.
One of the frustrating things about the carbon tax, and people don't seem to realize this, but I have personally seen technology that would negate any reason for a carbon tax. We can tech our way out of carbon issues. Let's just say carbon issues really are an issue. Let's just say that. Not overly convinced, but let's just say that man-made global warming due to carbon emissions are a really big deal. I call bullshit only because the technology has been around since the 80s to get rid of it.
Right.
I have approached the Suzuki Foundation. I've approached, I've knocked on a few doors of people that actually should care, and they do not. And I can show them. There's a fella in Calgary, I won't use his name because he's got some pretty weird phone calls that have disturbed him, but I have seen it with my own two eyes, the technology that can all but eliminate carbon emissions on any standing motor, any smokestacks, just gone. But they don't seem to care. And that is more than anything why I'm skeptical that a carbon tax is needed, because we can totally tech our way out of it. And I've seen it firsthand. And that's only, I'm not a scientist. This is just the one little thing that I've found through the grapevine. I wonder how much other stuff is out there.
Well, I mean, if you follow the work that Vivian Krause has been doing with the money that's coming into Canada, to Suzuki Foundation, Tides Foundation, a lot of the big environmental groups, they're dependent on not finding a solution for their source of money. And I think it's creating an issue. And I think Canadians need to start having a little bit deeper conversations around the money that's flowing in here that's manipulating elections and manipulating the hearts and minds of Canadians through some of the information, because some of the information, like you say, just does not hold weight. At the end of the day, Canada is such a small percentage of world emissions. We do more to reduce world emissions by extracting our resources and exporting resources and technology and manpower and training to China and India and some of these huge world emitters and bringing down their emissions than we'll ever be able to eliminate on Canadian soil.
I think it's when emotion is high, rationale is low, and people know this and they use it as a tool. So they keep the emotions high so people's brains turn off. And it doesn't matter how many degrees you have, how much time you spent in academia. If your emotion is high, you're not using the old noodle. You're just not. Neil Young, great performer, Canadian icon. But he's at the Calgary airport saying, I can smell the oil sands from here. It's like, dude, it's a 9-hour drive.
You maybe smell a backfire.
That might be the guy breaking wind next to you. But it's not the oil sands.
No,
that's a 9-hour drive away.
Yeah.
And you can't smell them from Edmonton.
Yeah.
You can't even smell them from Fort McMurray very often.
No.
No. And they're right there.
Yeah.
So, but you can smell it at the plant. I've been at the plants. They stink.
They do.
But you have to be actually at the plant to smell it.
Yeah.
But that's the emotion is high, rational is low. So he makes a statement that's so over the top.
Yeah.
And people go, oh, that's terrible. And then you get a duck full of oil and blame the oil sands for it. And
yeah, we need to get back to critically thinking some of these claims that are being made and actually learning as a society to critically think through any of these claims that are being made on either side.
Absolutely.
But I don't think we're being taught that in schools the way we used to be. And that debate, and we've lost the ability to debate because we've become so polarized that the minute you start critically thinking and challenging somebody, you're labeled as something, and the conversation ends.
I was called a white supremacist on Facebook. I had no idea how to react to that. I said, we've never met.
Yeah.
And you're going to pull it could I call you a pedophile and get away with it? Probably not.
No.
But, and it was over something silly and completely unrelated. But I think that we need more leadership in the public eye when it comes to critical thought. People that are taking the high road and not using the bullshit tactics that are used all the time. In order to do that, that comes from people that are in the public eye, like yourself.
Yeah.
And when you're having those conversations, being able to have them with respect and to model to others that you can disagree with somebody and respect them at the same time. You can dislike somebody and respect them simultaneously.
Absolutely.
And nobody's all bad.
No.
Trump being the fascinating example, right?
Yeah.
Very easy to dislike the guy. I totally get all the Trump haters.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not a Trump lover.
No.
But I don't hate the guy.
No.
And there is some to me, it's undeniable things he's doing that are really fantastic. And, but people can't see it because he's a dick.
Yeah.
So he's just completely written off. That's it. He's yucky, sleeps with porn stars. I don't like him. It's like, well, you already knew that.
You knew that when you cast the ballot.
You know what? Melania knows it. It's not a surprise to anybody. Nobody's upset about it. This is the guy you got.
Yeah.
And now let's look at the effectiveness of the policies. But people can't go there. That's the critical thought part.
Yeah.
But it's not being modeled.
No.
It's not being modeled in news shows. It's not being modeled by the dichotomy of Fox versus CNN. It's all name calling as opposed to mutual respect.
Well, and it's a race to getting the story out rather than stopping for a sec to fact check.
Have you, being in the public eye, have you been exposed to fake news yourself where you are the story or you are part of the story or you know the story firsthand and what you experienced in real life and what you see broadcast? Not the same thing. Have you been through that?
Absolutely.
Is there a standout?
Probably the worst one was in the 2015 election. It was global news, actually. I was in the middle of a scrum in the parking lot of Sheena's Candy Shop in High River, and was being asked a lot of questions. And the question I was asked was, is the flood coming up at the door? And I had been working on flood files for months. I knew exactly what the numbers were. I was working with the province and trying to get resolution to some of for families in High River. So knew the issue really well. But the question was, has it been coming up at the door? And I said no. And because it hadn't come up at the door. I mean, I knew that we were dealing with it. Everybody knew that we were dealing with it. But for some reason to that point, I hadn't heard anything at the door yet. Well, it was twisted into me looking like some ditzy bimbo who had absolutely no realization of the impact that the flood had in High River, which was absolutely not the case because I was weekly sitting across from residents of High River trying not to cry as they're telling me their story and in absolute awe because every single one of them said, as bad as my story is, my neighbor has it so much worse.
Would that have happened to you if you were an NDP person, if you're on the left? Do you find that there's a news bias there?
There is a news bias, but I think sometimes news is also trying to make a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think learning how to handle that and making sure that you're answering in complete sentences, and there's ways to mitigate that where it's harder for them to clip and edit the way they do. So I think, a little bit of experience and a little bit of understanding the biases that are in place both work to help mitigate some of it.
How else are you mitigating that to get back to the Trumpster? Using Twitter. That's why he tweets like a mad fool.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you're coming from the horse's mouth here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough to spin that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing anything on like with social media or blogging or anything like that so that it's a clear message from Carrie?
Yeah, I use Facebook for that mostly.
Okay.
Twitter I find is nasty. Usually you've got either trolls on there that are trying to dig something up, or you've got people planting stuff for media to pick up. And I don't find it's a really meaningful way to have conversation or to get thoughts out. So I like Facebook for that because you can go a little bit longer, you can go a little bit more in depth. You've got the ability to,
It's all right.
You've got the ability to respond to people. I'm starting to play in Instagram a little bit. I'm not great at it yet, not solid presence there, but I see value to that as well. And just making sure that taking every opportunity I can to share what my thoughts actually are rather than being filtered through a media source.
What do you think so far, and it doesn't have to be current to today, but in your time in politics, what has been twisted the worst? Probably wasn't the flood at the door thing. Is there something else that really stands out as, oh my God, did you ever twist what I said into something completely different?
Yeah, there's been a few times. And mostly at the end of the day, you're just kind of thinking, you're having to recognize that it's from people that don't even know you. But sometimes the stuff that they say is pretty incredible and attacking you as a person. And it's just so disjointed from who you actually are or what your intentions really are. And it's unfortunate because I think we need to get back to people actually just having a conversation. Pick up the phone. Hey, Carrie, that was really a boneheaded thing that you said there. What was behind that?
Yeah.
I don't understand what you said there. And just having that conversation. I'm happy to have the conversation. Sometimes I do step in it.
There's a hierarchy of arguments.
Mm-hmm.
And at the top of the hierarchy, it's refuting the central point. At the bottom of the hierarchy, it's name calling.
Mm-hmm.
You're a poo-poo head.
Mm-hmm.
And attacking character, attacking credibility.
Yeah.
And yet you see people with degrees, master's degrees, and they are still doing nothing more than name calling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their argument.
Yeah.
I think the more we, and again, through modeling,
yeah,
modeling in education, that is not a debate. That is not a conversation. That is a fight.
Yeah.
That's all that is.
Yeah.
And even on YouTube, to get the hits, the titles on these, there's Carrie destroys Bob.
Yeah.
It's always one destroys the other.
Yeah.
Or owns them.
Yeah.
And then if you look, there's always going to be where somebody sees the exact same interview and it's Bob destroys Carrie.
Yeah.
Instead of Carrie destroys Bob. And oh, okay. Yeah. Well, why does one person have to destroy the other? But that's what sells.
Yeah. It is.
Rage sells, shock sells. But again, that's what we keep rewarding though by clicking on it.
It is, absolutely. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why I struggle sometimes in this is because I don't react like that. I will never create a post or say something in public to get an emotional reaction out of people that's negative and build up the rage. Because I think at the end of the day, if we can actually have a rational conversation on it, we can reach a solution. But like you said earlier, if we elevate that emotion and get into a rage place, we're never finding a solution.
Are you finding that people are upset that the UCP is the UCP? I was a Wild Rose member.
Okay.
And only because I couldn't reward the Conservative Party because of just the amount of been around too long,
Yeah.
just too long, and anybody that's around too long gets corrupt.
Yeah.
And now they've blended.
Yeah.
Has there been hard feelings over that?
Yeah, there has been. And we've got some work to do to make sure that everybody's coming back together, and that we're making policies that are making sense for both groups, I guess, that is coming in. Excuse me. I think anytime that you're bringing two groups together, there had been so much polarization between these two groups,
Mm-hmm.
and animosity and spears throwing into each other's camp, that all of a sudden everybody's in one group and it's like, well, I was fighting you 5 minutes ago. Now how am I supposed to be your friend?
Yeah.
And so I think we need to really concentrate on making sure that we're building one team going forward.
Well, the other downside of spite is that people will fight you on principle,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to using their head.
Yeah.
And once that bad blood has been created, that is tough to bridge after.
It is.
So why go there in the first place?
Well, yeah.
Because it creates this negative legacy.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between the UCP and Wild Rose and the Conservative Party? Like, what's the middle ground there?
I don't.
It's
hard. I mean, we're going to
tough one.
spend all winter building it.
Yeah.
I think as long as we focus on economic issues and making sure that we've got a strong economic plan, and we can have open discussions around the issues that are before us and try to find a compromise that works, I think we'll be okay. But as for the differences right now, I mean, the policy for the UCP is still being written, so there's no really good way to answer that right now.
The people that tend to vote left are people in the public, with a public paycheck, like
Mm-hmm.
Education, healthcare. So for people in those worlds that usually out of fear will avoid conservatism because
Mm-hmm.
the Ralph Klein cuts that may have gone just a little too far back when those happened. That sting is still there.
Yeah.
So what would you say to the school teachers who are worried about their budget getting cut if they vote conservative?
I would say let's have a conversation, because every conservative I've spoken to recognizes that there has to be dollars on the front end for educating students. It's not the classrooms where we have concerns around spending. I mean, my concerns around spending are, you look at the Calgary Board of Education, for example, with their huge administrative budget. Is that actually necessary? And I'm open to hearing a defense of, yeah, it is necessary and this is why. But I hope that they would be willing to hear a challenge of, explain to me why this is necessary. Because when we're putting dollars into education, my expectation is that those dollars go to kids in classrooms. And we know of school boards in this province that are sitting on millions and millions of dollars worth of reserves. And why? And is it an insecurity of consistency of funding that's causing them to stockpile these dollars? Okay, well then how do we resolve that? How do we make sure that you're a little bit more secure in consistency of dollars coming so that you're actually spending them on the classrooms? And just really having a good, solid conversation around what exactly are the issues that we're facing here and how do we go forward? There's
every now and then you see a conversation, because my wife is the school principal, I understand I hear that side of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I hear usually through a conservative leader pushing back against things like transgenderism within the school and how to deal with that, the washroom debate, which I don't understand why that's even a problem, but and there's that still that stigma it's in the States and it's still here, and it's the left always points and says you are intolerant because you're conservative, you are a racist, you're transphobic, and all these things. I think that if people are pointing fingers at that, they would expect that more from the Wildrose than they would from the Conservatives, but by a slim margin. I think that's the perception,
Yeah, it is.
and that's the conversations that I see on public forums and whatnot. And I have heard a couple of things from a couple of Conservative leaders who are, well, it's not exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
But what has been your experience in that world with these conversations? Like, what are the viewpoints? What can people with concerns about diversity and equality, what do they need to know about the UCP?
I think, excuse me, I think it goes back to the quality of people that are getting through these nomination processes.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think it's a really easy way, it's an easy arrow to throw at the Conservatives and get people fearing what Conservatives actually believe in. At the end of the day, I believe children need to be protected in schools. I really don't care what their sexual orientation is. How do we get to making sure that all of these kids are protected?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually haven't met a Conservative that would honestly create policy that would harm any child or any gender or any ethnicity. It's more about getting out of the way of that stuff and just letting people be. So I'm trying to go back to your question. I just think, like I said, I think it's an easy arrow to throw. I think if we actually have conversations where we can sit down and talk about where people's perspectives are, I think it will alleviate some of those fears. But I think, going back to our earlier conversation, having these conversations around tough emotional issues is an art that we've lost. And I think through that process, kids are getting hurt. When we're getting to points where we're legislating thou shalt or thou shall not, or, on those fringes of the extreme, we're forgetting that there's kids in the middle that actually need, and that the objective is keeping them safe.
We have a female premier. We've had a couple in a row. The former leader of Wildrose was a lady. Other provinces with female premiers, until Ontario recently. Is it still a man's game?
That's not something I've ever experienced in a real way. I remember having a conversation back in 2007, 2008 at an AUMA convention with some female colleagues. And there was a lady there who was probably about 20 years older. And then the other two, like me and the other one, were same age, early 30s. And her experiences of being in politics for 20 years and the man's game that she felt that she was having to deal with and the sexism that she felt she was dealing with was not something that we could relate with as 30-year-olds. Sure, it still exists, but I've never actually run into it. I was early 30s, 32, 33-year-old counselor at the table with 25 regional mayors in the city of Edmonton, and was never treated as anything less than an equal.
Do you think there's still that image out there, especially from those on the left, that they look at conservatism, they think a bunch of old white men that are intolerant?
They do, yeah. And I think part of the fact that coming through is that conservative women expect to earn the position. And the conservative women that I know are incredibly strong. I mean, you start looking at Michelle Rempel or Lisa Ray or Candice Bergen or, any the female conservative politicians, and there's nobody that would want to go up against them in a debate. They're incredibly strong. So I think on the conservative side, we need to do a little bit better mentoring women and teaching them how to win their nominations. But it's so much more rewarding when you actually go into the fight and you come out the winner than if it's handed to you in a protected nomination.
In the States, it's pretty blatant that conservative women get attacked horribly by their opponents, and they get called the equivalent of a female Uncle Tom kind of thing, or if you're a conservative and you're a woman, you're against your own gender. I haven't seen as much of that up here, but I've found that the same sentiment still kind of dangles in the air. Have you run into that yourself, where you're just like, how could you be a woman and a conservative?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I've been told recently even that I'm in the wrong party because of my views. It's like, well, no, actually, when I have conversations with my conservative friends, these are the issues we talk about, and we're similar on our views.
What's the biggest misconception, like where people, well, conservatives, they believe this, and it's just fearful and hateful. What is there one in particular where people just got it wrong?
I think the whole racist homophobe issue.
Mm-hmm. That's the most bizarre attack for you?
It is. It's completely bizarre and way off base. But going back to your question with women in politics, I think up here it's just women in general that are getting attacked when they're in politics. You look at some of the horrific things that have been said against Rachel Notley or Sandra Jansen or, Michelle Rempel, or you look at any woman in politics right now, and if you can compare Twitter feeds against a man's Twitter feed or a woman's Twitter feed, you'll see a huge difference in the level of aggression and nastiness. A woman politician, it's not outside of the realm for somebody to be on Twitter saying that, you should be raped or you should be whatever.
Oh my
God.
It's
absolutely horrifying things that she's being told. And I've never seen that on a man's. It's like, you're an asshole, you're a dick, you're whatever. But they don't go to that level of sexual aggression that females will see.
Well, and you got to wonder where that's coming from. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the type of people that are making comments like that are the same people that wear their pajamas in the middle of the day.
Yeah, to Walmart.
To Walmart. And hey, I love Walmart.
Nothing wrong with Walmart.
I shop there all the time. I do. That's where all my kids get their clothes.
Yeah.
But I don't wear my pajama pants while I'm shopping there.
Yeah.
But it seems like that's the same kind of crowd.
Yeah.
And yet they're so loud.
But those people are on the left and the right.
Sure they are.
It seems to be just targeting from both sides. So
yeah, they just they do it a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be somebody lacking education. I have seen people with all kinds of academia, degrees and master's degrees that diminish the conversation just as far as that.
Yeah.
Maybe with a bit more elocution.
Yeah.
And a better grammar.
Yeah.
But it boils down to the same thing.
Yeah.
And hateful. Have you had any scares yourself as far as threats or backlash?
No.
Well, it's because you're 6'2". So
there's that. My husband is 6'4", so
yeah, that probably helps. That's why I call you ma'am.
Thank you.
And I shake your hand very respectfully.
Here we go.
I still haven't made a Star Wars joke.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, we got how much? Half an hour in here?
Yeah, we got half an hour in. But is there anything in particular that people need to know about you and the party when they make their decision? Something that's what do people not know about Carrie?
Probably that I hate talking about myself.
Yeah.
Absolutely hate talking about myself. So, you see politicians stand up and they've got a long list of everything that they've done. I don't keep track. I let my work stand on its own, and it's not always seen. So that's probably one of the things. I won't stand up usually in a forum and go on about my experience and background because it's not it's relevant, but it's just not something I'm comfortable talking about a whole lot.
It's not what politics is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be about you. It's supposed to be your service to the community. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yes.
So to that, is there one hot button issue, like one passionate issue in particular that you're going to be carrying the torch for should you be elected?
It's pretty broad, but it's representation. It's making sure that I'm on the ground in the communities, understanding what's going on in the communities, and then taking that back to Edmonton and actively working on the files that are important to the residents of Highwood. Because I think that's something we need, that focus here. We've got some pretty big issues that we need to tackle through rural crime. We've got a lot of families that are really concerned with the changes being made in education. We've got some pretty big infrastructure issues all across this constituency that need an advocate that understands the issue and is ready to push and go for it. And so at the end of the day, I mean, it would just be that, making sure that those needs are represented.
Any specific issues, though, that you want to be carrying the torch for?
Like I said, there's carbon tax is a huge one, would be the first one, but that's also the priority of Jason Kenney and the party. So that's probably not a big one. It would come down to making sure that the water infrastructure needs across this constituency are addressed. Because all 4 municipalities in this constituency are facing water issues of one direction or another that need quick resolution. Right.
And are there solutions? Are there solutions that could be done but haven't been?
Yeah, we just need a concentrated message going forward. This is what we actually need. I think sometimes the message has been confused or hasn't been narrowly focused enough to get the results that we need to see. And it hasn't been represented incredibly well. So we need to make sure that we're focusing that message and taking it concisely forward.
For Okotoks, have we put the horse in front of the cart for development? Did we overdevelop without having the water issue in place?
No, for the last 3 or 4 years, what year are we now? But for the last 3 years, any development that's come in has had to bring its own water with it. And they're only allowed to use a percentage of the water that they bring, and the rest of it goes back into the pool. So we've been asking our developers to help us with water solution. At the same time, buying licenses year over year over year is not the solution that we need going forward. It's incredibly expensive.
It's not sustainable.
No, not at all.
All right. Well, Carrie, is there any closing words that people need to know?
I don't think so. Just if you're a UCP member, make sure you're out and voting on Tuesday.
Well, when people are looking at the ballot, is there a dividing line between yourself and, say, Wayne? Because I think you're probably the 2 front runners.
We just have very different approaches. People have a very clear choice between Wayne and I about how they want their issues represented coming out of Highwood.
Can you have an example? So somebody could say, I would prefer this approach over that approach.
My approach tends to be very collaborative, and Wayne's is very strong in a different way.
Okay. All righty. Well, Carrie, thanks so much for being on the Meincke Show podcast.
Thank you.
All righty. I didn't ask you to sing it, though, so we're all right.
That's probably a good thing.
All right. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, we had quite a few.
Did we?
Yeah, quite a few that were joined